Hey guys, welcome back to Fishing It Up. Today I'm going to go over what I use to fish for crappie in the fall. I love jigging flooded timber. It's my favorite. So everything I do is going to be revolving around that. There is sometimes that I fish the river and there's no flooded timber involved, but one of my favorite things is using a long rod and jigging standing timber. Alright, first thing I want to go over is the rod and the reel. I have a couple different ones. My favorite is this 10-foot Arachne from Sixgill. It is, it's really sensitive, it's really great. I run a 30-pound braid on it to a 6-pound fluorocarbon leader, and the reel is a cheap Lews light speed. It's the 75 size. You can pick it up at Walmart. You know, I'm not really reeling a whole lot, so, you know, it's mostly just a straight up, maybe reel a couple cranks sometimes, depending on the fish and how deep I am. But that's about it. On this one, I actually have a drop shot rigged up with a either a number 6 or a number 4 Aberden hook, eagle claw. That way, if you get hung up in the trees, the hook will bend and straighten out before you break off your leader or anything else. That's a good thing. That's the main thing. Anytime you're fishing standing timber or any kind of brush, you want a hook that will bend out before it breaks your leader or your main line. You know, you're probably not going to catch a crappie that's going to straighten the hook, but it's great if you can straighten the hook out and save having to retie all day long. It's super aggravating. But when I'm fishing minnows, I usually drop shot them, and that kind of holds them out there horizontal. It's a good presentation. It's easy to pull up and down out of the limbs. Usually don't have too many issues with it getting hung up. And if I do, the 30-pound braid that's on here will easily straighten the hook out for me. The other one I'm using is ACC Crappie Stix. It's an 11-footer. It has a Pflueger. It's also a 75 series reel on there. Same setup, 30-pound braid to a 6-pound fluorocarbon leader. And then I also have a 12-foot Sixgill rod, the Arachne, in it has the Pflueger Reel on it as well. The same setup, all 30-pound braid. Preferably, if you could go lighter, you could go 10-pound braid if you wanted to, and then even, you know, use a 5-6-pound fluorocarbon leader. You could go smaller if you wanted to. It's just I like to be on the heavier end of it. For bass fishing, I use 10-pound braid and a 8-pound fluorocarbon leader, and that has held up really good. So if I hadn't already invested the money 5 years ago into 30-pound braid, I probably wouldn't be using it. But it's there, it works good, and it gives you the sound that you want as it's flying through the eyes of the rod. So makes me feel good. The 10-pound braid I use for bass fishing, it's really smooth, and it has it's not braided, I guess. It's just real small fibers, and if they are braided, you can't feel them like you can on the line I'm using on the crappie setups. Now, I kind of want to talk about the hooks a little bit. I mentioned them previously, the Aberden hooks. I'm going to use the Aberdens in a 4 and a 6. These are all Eagle Claw brand. Put it down over there. Hopefully you can see those. If not, I'll link them down in the description. And that's just so that when I'm fishing live bait, minnows, or if you want me to get real redneck, it is minnows. You know, if you're fishing minnows, you want to use these little gold hooks so they bend out, like mentioned previously. Now, if you're going to fish, say these Bobby Garland, the baby shads, I know everybody loves the monkey milk color. If you're going to fish these, hopefully you can see the bend in that little hook there. No, I'll put a link up for all these hooks that I use, but I use either a 32nd or a 16th ounce for the Bobby Garland baby shads. And those work really good. You get them pretty good sized packs. There's a 25 pack. It has different colors: white, yellows, orange, black. Here's a 16th ounce. It's got white and black in it. But I just prefer those because of the bend. It seems like I get a better hookup than like if you had a straight shank one. Let me dig one out here. I have a whole box of those as well. Grab one of these. These are a little bit heavier, but these are just a straight shank one, which you could use these if that's all you can find. Just a little straight shank jig hook. They work just as well, but me personally, I prefer the eagle claw ones. I'm not sure if these actually have a certain name, but I'll try my best to link this down below so that you can see what I'm using. All right, let me kind of go over. I'm using Power Pro. It's just 30 pounds, but what I've been using, and I use high vis. That's why I use the leader. I mean, you can do it any way you want, but I prefer using the leader with high vis. That way I can see the line easily, and that's just when I ain't staring at the live scope, I guess. But for me to be able to see it, I'm not getting any younger. The high vis helps out great. But here's what I'm using is Power Pro. This is the Moonshine. This one's actually supposed to glow in the dark. I'm using this on my bass setup, but if I was to change out the line on these crappie setups, this is what I go to. I'm just using the regular Power Pro on those in a high vis. It's not the super slick B2 like this. So to cover a little bit of the lures, I'm obviously using the Bobby Garland, the original baby shads. I have those in about every color. I've tried to, I have a local, like a little bitty quick stop, just a little small market that's close to my house, and they have some fishing supplies because they're close to the lake. And he wanted rid of some of his stock, so he gave me a good deal on them, and I bought every one he had. So I got pretty much every color of those. There's other things you can get. Strike King, I've had real good luck on these little 2-inch grubs, or you can get some small tubes. Anything like that, you can pick up these small packs at Walmart if you want to just try them out. They have these small little packs of the baby shad, or just different things that they have, the tubes and the grubs in those small little packs at Walmart. You can pick them up pretty cheap. I also, sometimes I fish these marabou jigs. Not as often, but I will fish them all the same way on that long jigging rod, and usually around standing timber. All right, so how do I find the crappie? Where do I know to look? What am I doing? So me, because I'm fishing standing timber, it's easy for me to find it on my local lake. I mean, you can look at a map or one of the Navionics maps and find standing timber. You should be able to do the same through your local lake if that's what you prefer to do, is fish some standing timber that's been flooded. And these fish are usually relating to the trees. They're easier to catch, especially as when the fall and winter starts coming on. That transition from fall to winter, they are relating to those trees. It makes it easier for me to find them. I'm not having to chase them all over the lake, because a lot of times I would go to an area to find the crappie, and they had pulled off the trees and they were out chasing shad feeding, and they weren't in there. So if I didn't want to hunt them down and try to find them that way, which wasn't my preferred way to catch them, but you may find that it is the way you like catching them, is when they're chasing shad or out feeding. But I preferred them being related to the trees, and it was easy to locate them because they were easy seen on live scope, especially as they would just be giant groups. They're usually stacked above each other, especially if you're using a 2D sonar, your standard sonar. They're going to be stacked like a Christmas tree. And when you see them on live scope, they will be larger balls, and sometimes, especially if they're in some kind of cedar or pine tree, they're going to look like maybe they're part of that tree. And it may be like, well, is that crappie or is it not crappie? So usually how I would find out is I would throw something close and hold whatever lure it is I'm using, whether it's a minnow or it's one of the baby Garland shads, Bobby Garland shad lures. I would hold that above them to see if anything pulled out of the structure towards the lure itself. And if they did, then I knew it was. That was a good way to confirm that it was actually crappie. and not just part of the tree. Now with the LVS 34, it has better target separation, so I haven't used it for crappie yet, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that it's probably better than the LVS 32 was, and I might be able to tell without having to do that if it's actually crappie or not, because it separates usually the larger shad from the smaller shad when I'm looking at balls of shad or schools of shad, whatever you prefer to call them. It usually separates them so good I can see the larger shad in the bottom of the school, and sometimes that hurts me because I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe that's bass in the bottom, when it's not. It's actually larger shad that are showing up as individual fish. So, kind of keep that in mind. You know, it never hurts to just pitch something in there and find out. If you don't have any kind of sonar or anything like that, they're going to be, especially if you have like a highland reservoir, the fish you pull up and they're in a holler or in the back of a creek. Try to fish the trees that are out towards the middle, like how the middle of that creek arm, the channel. Try to fish the ones that are closer to that, so they're deeper, and they will probably be anywhere from, especially when your thermocline disappears, if you have a thermocline on that lake, they can be as deep as 30, 35 feet and above, and they could actually be deeper, but typically I'm fishing in that 15 to 30 foot range, depending on how they're set up and the time of year and everything. That's usually about where they're at, and they're usually in the river channel part of it, so your deepest part of the creek arm. And sometimes they'll move, you know, they can move to the back of it, but typically that's where I've caught the biggest fish, is in the middle of that the back, you know, because say you come into a creek arm and you have these offshoots shooting off and they have standing timber in them. Those deepest trees right there in the middle, closest to the main creek arm there, are going to be the ones that's going to hold the crappie the majority of the time. Now, if you don't have the sonar, then just try dropping down, count your line down, count the lure down, and just try different depths. You know, drop it down to 30 and work it back up in 5 foot increments or something, and try that. Do that a couple times all the way around the tree. If that don't work, move to the next one. Now, if the trees are actually fully submerged, personally, I have found the trees that are fully submerged usually are holding fish. So if you got one that you can float your boat over, not necessarily drive it over with the propeller, but if it'll float over top of it, or it's a couple feet, a foot, something like that, you know, you don't want to get stuck on top of it. As long as it's submerged, there's usually fish on that tree. Now I'm saying usually, there's always exceptions to anything to do with fishing, but they're usually on those trees, and those trees are usually in the deepest part of that creek arm, or the back of that creek. Hey guys, a large number of you are choosing to watch my videos, and I am very pleased with that. I'm very happy that you're taking the time to watch my videos, but only 3% of you are choosing to subscribe. Now, it doesn't hurt you at all to click the subscribe button, and it helps me out a lot to help me get to my goal so I can get monetized. Monetizing at some point will help me get new equipment and make better videos. So I would love to make better videos and more videos and keep this going. All right, hopefully you've enjoyed today's video. Just try to take this information and get out on your body of water and use it to locate and catch some crappie. They're great eating. I love them once the water starts to cool off. Not a big fan when it's warm. It just seems like they're fishier when the water's warm, but when it starts to cool off into October and stuff, especially here in the South, I think they're great. As always, guys, like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Fishing It Up.